farm animals and plants, including traditional varieties of fruit trees. The protection of biodiversity is currently one of the biggest challenges of civilization, especially in climate change. Was the Declaration Forests for Climate, adopted by 82 countries during the COP24 Climate Summit in Katowice. The actions we are taking today will be of fundamental significance for what will happen tomorrow, and their effects will be assessed by future generations. Therefore, let us implement them together with passion, guided by the common good and the desire to change better. Thank you for your attention.
Republic of Poland for the statement just made. I now invite the President of the Republic of Colombia to deliver a pre-recorded statement.
They were talking about tree planting campaigns and saving some species from extinction or something.
The planet is in a state of emergency.
El planeta!
Biodiversity at a speed never before. And the pandemic made it even more patently clear that there is an inextricable link between a healthy and prosperous life and healthy ecosystems. The post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework is an opportunity to ensure that from the very highest level, we adopt measures which will allow us to achieve a vision of living in harmony with nature by the year 2050. In Colombia, we wish this framework to be effective. We wish to see the post-COVID-19 economic recovery process be green and just, and we wish to ensure that we can move forward with the achievement of the SDGs. To do that, we need to embrace 5 commitments. We need to ensure, first of all, that 30% of the land and marine area of the globe has protected status by 2030. We need to embrace sustainable patterns of production and consumption in the sectors with greatest environmental impact. Third, we must incorporate biodiversity in the planning and management of all productive sectors and at all levels of government. 4, we need to commit to nature-based solutions as cost-effective tools to preserve biodiversity. At the same time, such tools create jobs and stimulate economic growth. 5, we must leverage greater resources from all sources to protect and promote biodiversity. In Colombia, biodiversity is a strategic asset found across the nation. In our fight against deforestation, for example, we have successfully reduced between 2018 and 2019 deforestation by 20%, and we formed the Coalition for the Prohibition of Deforestation. We have planted 35 million trees of a goal of 180 million. We want to plant 180 million trees by 2050. We want to move forward with a productive model which sees us produce while we conserve and conserve while we produce. We have incentives for environmental protection, such as payments for environmental services. Energy also now occupies a greater share of our energy mix. Let us continue thus. We continue to promote the lithium.
Back in 2029, Europe is now known as Europa. There are no more countries in Europe or Europa, just tribes that fight each other over dominance. Our 3 heroes, 2 brothers and a sister, are part of this peaceful tribe called the Indigenous. They live in the forest, high atop a hill, away from the rest of the tribes, and they've managed to keep out of everyone else's affairs for years until now. In that last clip, she mentioned the cube. The 3 siblings, Liv, Keanu, and Elia, they're out gathering supplies, and this aircraft crashes in their forest, an aircraft like nothing they'd ever seen. So Elia, the youngest brother, finds this mysterious glowing cube that came out of that craft, and he just takes it for himself. Turns out that aircraft and that cube are part of a mysterious faction known as the Atlanteans. No one really knows anything about them except that their technology is streets ahead of everyone else, and that cube could potentially hold the key to total power or to salvation, because while the tribes fight amongst themselves, there is a much bigger and darker threat coming that could wipe them all out. It's at 83% on Rotten Tomatoes. Many of the reviews that I saw were kind of middling, but I loved it. I thought this was a blast. 6 episodes, 40 to 45 minutes each, so it was a quick binge, addictive, exciting, stylish, great production.
God damn it, you don't even...
Qui a des valeurs, qui a une histoire, qui a un projet, qui a des ambitions. Non, il faut que à droite, dès que les régionales seront pas.
And of course, is herd immunity. And the idea here is that, you know, enough people have been infected that the virus is literally running out of susceptible hosts.
We think that somewhere between 15 to 30% of American adults have already been infected with COVID-19. That's according to our CDC.
That's the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which monitors public health in the US.
And people recovering from COVID-19 typically develop long-lasting immunological protection.
And those 15 to 30% who've caught it, Derek argues, are people who are more exposed to catching the virus than the rest of the population, perhaps because their job brings them into contact with infected people, such as healthcare workers, or they choose not to adhere to practices such as social distancing or mask wearing.
I do think it's possible that even though I don't think America is anywhere close to what anyone would call herd immunity, we might have partial immunity in some places, which is narrowing the pathway forward for this virus.
The next hypothesis is that people have changed their behavior.
I do think when things get really out of hand and you hear about a lot of people around you getting infected, that you do start to adapt your behavior and probably forego some of those meetups that you might have with people outside your household. And the collective effect of those small changes in behavior can really do the trick in pushing that R value down and lowering transmission.
If the R value goes high enough, long enough, you can push it down.
Behavior, of course, has to drive some element of any phenomenon that has to do with this pandemic. But the weird thing about behavior, and the reason I don't think it explains everything, is that behavior is extremely variable across geography and across the world. You know, not every country or state has the same culture of mask wearing or social distancing or other virus mitigating habits.
They usually drop bombs on people that wear masks.
COVID-19 is in retreat across practically the entire northern hemisphere. So something else must be happening, I think.
And that brings us to seasonality.
That virus survives
the US is currently emerging
3 days or
from
some
the winter
shit on
months.
polyester.
If you look at
24 hours on cotton, 3 days of
the
polyester.
behavior of past coronaviruses before SARS-CoV-2, you see that they typically peak in the northern hemisphere during the winter. And so it's possible that this coronavirus is simply tracing the maze of every previous coronavirus, which is that it winds up in December and January, and then falls in January and February, and hopefully throughout the spring.
So is it the weather, the temperature which has this effect?
That's not real.
I think there's a lot we don't understand about that, even with something like the flu. Pure seasonality as far as weather is not a great fit for, explaining what's been going on. But I do think that the idea that the calendar and especially holidays are related to social mixing and our tendency to move indoors as well might help explain some of these dynamics.
Derek and Jennifer both think you have to look at other countries to see what's happening there. As we mentioned, there are sharp declines in Europe. Derek is leaning towards two reasons for the decline in cases.
So what explanation here is global? And I guess you could say there are really two.
The rate of increase is not
seasonality,
increasing as much as it
for a
was
variety of
last
reasons that epidemiologists and scientists only partially understand. These kind of viruses do tend to peak in January and February. Maybe it has to do with weather, maybe it has to do with the angle of the sun, maybe it has to do with humidity or even aspects of human behavior in response to cold weather. And number two is partial immunity. So
common sense,
many people across the world
it's called a cold
have been exposed to this virus.
It gets cold.
And at some point, I suppose you would think the virus's path forward would be limited because of the immunity built up in the populations it had already infected.
That's not how it works.
It's true that many countries emerging from winter in the northern hemisphere are seeing cases decline. What about countries elsewhere? South Africa is seeing a similar drop. In early January, daily cases peaked at around 18,000. At the end of February, they were reporting around 1,600 new cases a day. And they're not in midwinter, in midsummer.
I think we should be a little more humble in the face of these pandemic dynamics and admit that we can't perfectly predict or explain. You know, the pandemic really is kind of a force of nature that we don't fully understand. And on top of that, it's interacting in very complex ways with human behavior, which we know we're actually terrible at modeling.
Thanks to Derek Thompson and Professor Jennifer Dowd. And that is all we have time for this week. But if you'd like to get in touch, email moreorless@bbc.co.uk. We will be back next week. And until then, goodbye.
This is the BBC World Service. And on the inquiry this week, the coup in Myanmar on February the 1st and arrest of the country's elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi shocked the world. I'm Tanya Beckett, and on this week's programme, we're asking, what is the future for Myanmar? The inquiry at bbcworldservice.com/inquiry. And in an hour, Embankment Baby. Tony May was abandoned as a baby in London in 1942 and has never known who his birth parents were. Now, thanks to DNA testing and detective work, Tony's finally getting closer to the truth. But the revelations will change more than just his life. This is the BBC World Service, the world's radio station. As the global COVID-19 vaccination drive slowly gathers pace, on Business Weekly, we'll be looking at whether vaccine passports will help us return to life as we once knew it. We'll also hear from the people scooping face masks out of the ocean, who are warning that COVID has caused a pandemic of plastic waste.
We are seeing more and more of these single-use disposable masks. Already I've
that's
got
okay, because the UN bought a couple of boxes to put the used needles in.
Another one.
The proper
And
boxes.
we'll meet the couples who got married during the pandemic in really quite extraordinary circumstances.
I sat in the car alone with tear gas, holding my wedding dress over my eyes. We're like, okay, here we are. None of us can see very well.
That's all after the news.
Hello, I'm David Harper with the BBC News. US regulators have authorized the use of the Johnson & Johnson COVID vaccine for people aged 18 and over. It's the third vaccine to become available in the
Indian household, plus a circle of only 10. Morrison says the chain of transmission must be halted as the province reports 6 new cases of COVID-19. Alberta Health Services is apologizing for an error in its stress testing of its online vaccination booking system. Many spent hours Wednesday either being kicked off the province's booking website or getting busy signals on the phone. Health officials say they underestimated the number of Albertans 75 years and up who would call 811 or go online to book at launch time. The AHS now says technical issues have been fixed. A virtual waiting room is in place and the system is stable. It looked like a wrecking yard. Dozens of vehicles were involved in a crash on an icy interstate highway bridge over the Yellowstone River outside Billings, Montana. Police say about 30 vehicles were involved. No fatalities are reported, but 2 people were critically injured. Ice on the bridge caused the wreck, which closed I-90 for a time. A second former aide has come forward with sexual harassment allegations against New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, who responded with a statement Saturday saying he never made advances toward her and never intended to be inappropriate. Charlotte Bennett says Cuomo.
The ex-president's America First strategy had always been right for the country. Mr. Pompeo, who slammed the Biden
emballé dans un papier rouge et blanc. Vous êtes le numéro 1 du marché français. Avec vos 7000 éleveurs adhérents, vous réalisez un chiffre d'affaires de 285 millions d'euros. Et c'était il y a un peu plus de 50 ans, en 1969, que Paysans Bretons voit le jour. Comment est cette idée?
Eh bien, comme vous
l'Arabie Saoudite. Biden est en train d'essayer de marcher sur la corde raide. De manière concrète, ils ont dit que donc l'administration arrêterait de livrer des armes qui seraient utilisées pendant la guerre contre le Yémen, ce qui est très bien. Ça, c'est un pas positif. Mais dans le même temps, l'administration a dit aussi qu'il continuerait à aider les Saoudiens à se défendre contre des attaques venant de Téhéran. Alors, il faut se souvenir qu'en 2015, c'était précisément pour cette raison que l'administration Obama avait commencé à soutenir la guerre saoudienne contre le Yémen.
L'anthropologue Pascal Ménoré, invité de RFI Midi avec Jean-Baptiste Marot, entretien retrouvé en intégralité sur RFI.fr et nos applications. L'Iran est-il responsable de l'explosion à bord d'un navire israélien? En tout cas, les premiers soupçons du ministre de la Défense de l'État hébreu, Benny Gantz, sont tournés vers la République islamique. Il a dit ce samedi dans une interview télévisée au lendemain de l'incident à bord du Helios Ray. Ce cargo a été victime d'une explosion alors qu'il se trouvait dans le golfe d'Oman. L'Iran qui soutient par ailleurs les rebelles houthis du Yémen dans le conflit qui déchire le pays du sud de la péninsule arabique. Une bataille meurtrière est en cours dans le nord pour le contrôle de la province pétrolière de Marib. Au moins 50 morts supplémentaires ont été recensés ce samedi dans les affrontements entre les rebelles et les forces loyalistes. La veille, 60 combattants avaient perdu la vie dans cette bataille. Contrôler les réseaux sociaux, beaucoup d'États en ont rêvé, l'Inde le fait peut-être. Les autorités ont dévoilé cette semaine un nouveau code de régulation d'Internet. Objectif, restreindre les contenus partagés sur Facebook ou Twitter, notamment pour office.
We are attempting by proposing a charter that protects and extends the legal right to exist to selected ecosystems and all species of flora and fauna, to advance the causes of preserving enough of nature for human civilization to continue and thrive, and empower the world's environmental activists and others to take legal action on behalf of nature's rights. We owe this to the future generations. COVID-19 has taught us all a lesson. We cannot keep neglecting nature and expect no consequences. At no time has practical, principled global action been needed more than at present to save our environment. Young activists everywhere are urging us to take action. We must do more than simply not get in their way. We must act for our world.
No, you should just get out of the way.
Not for the people of one place and time.
Who's this magical mystical person that's in somebody's way that is not you?
God says in the Quran, there is no creature that crawls upon the earth, nor bird that flies with its wings, but that they are communities like yourselves. Let us together protect these communities, and in so doing, protect ourselves.
Mode du vegan qui détourne certains consommateurs des produits lactés vous fait peur?
Sur la mer d'Andaman à bord d'un bateau-pêche, le chef de la diplomatie de Dhaka considère que son pays n'a aucune obligation d'accueillir ces demandeurs d'asile qui ont fui les persécutions de la junte militaire birmane. RFI, il est 22h07 à Port-au-Prince et c'est un mur qui va bientôt couper en deux l'île caribéenne d'Hispaniola. La République dominicaine a annoncé ce samedi vouloir construire une clôture avec caméras et détecteurs infrarouges le long de ses 380 km de frontière avec Haïti. Objectif affiché, freiner l'immigration clandestine et le commerce illégal entre les deux États. Début des travaux dans la seconde moitié de cette année. En Martinique voisine, au moins 5000 personnes ont manifesté ce samedi à Fort-de-France pour protester contre l'impunité et une possible prescription dans le dossier du chlordécone. Cet insecticide toxique pulvérisé dans les bananeraies des Antilles françaises pendant 20 ans entre 1973 et 1993. Un produit accusé aujourd'hui d'avoir empoisonné l'île française et sa voisine, la Guadeloupe. Dans l'Hexagone, les villes de Dunkerque et Nice sont de nouveau sous cloche pour lutter contre le Covid. Un confinement y est décrété pour ce week-end et le suivant au moins. Et pour la troisième fois depuis le début de la crise sanitaire, les Niçois subissent les limitations de déplacement et la fermeture des magasins dits non essentiels. Les contrôles d'attestation et du port du masque ont également fait leur retour. Reportage de notre envoyé spécial.
It is also of great importance
for the success of biotechnology. And ultimately, this is a question of intergenerational justice. We could lose 1 million species within decades as a result of human action. Such a world would be incomparable to today. I support the Secretary General's call for transformative change. We must do more and do better to protect our nature. Our production and consumption patterns must be
and it sounds like, and whether it's going to be a pay increase or not for the monthly fee, but if he's going to be double what he is now, he's just going to be on the moon, over the moon.
This is also outpacing quite a few terrestrial packages that we're getting from Shaw and TELUS and Rogers and Bell and whomever else. My parents live in this little town called.
Ces courses, pourtant, il était prêt.
J'en ai fait d'autres d'avance.
Mais l'attestation n'empêche pas de contourner un peu la règle.
J'ai triché un petit peu à cause du chien.
La promenade du chien fait partie des 12 motifs de dérogation. Pauline Glaise, Nice, RFI.
Et c'est ainsi que se termine ce journal. Je vous retrouve dans quelques instants sur la radio mondiale. Et 4h10 ici à Paris, et vous êtes toujours sur Radio France Internationale.
Benoît Alméral.
On est ensemble jusqu'à 4h30 avec les reportages, les chroniques et les décryptages de la rédaction de RFI. On ira aux Philippines, le pays confronté à une hécatombe parmi ses personnels soignants envoyés aux 4 coins du monde pour lutter contre le Covid-19. On tirera aussi le portrait de Mario Draghi, le nouveau Premier ministre italien et notre Européen de la semaine. Notre chronique de l'expatriation Vivre ailleurs vous emmène.
Present a variety of the Austrian landscapes and wildlife. However, as everywhere in the world, we feel the loss of biodiversity
and people would fucking
issues.
So what do people make of the idea of vaccine passports? We spoke to these Londoners to get their views.
I am for it. Whether you want to travel, you want to go to the pub, people need to be vaccinated.
I do think the government has a great record of IT implementations and managing the technology very well. So I think it would be very much depend on how the passport was managed and how it was going to be used. We're all doing it for each other, you know. We're just trying to keep each other well. So I don't have a problem with it whatsoever.
I don't think it should be a passport to say you can do this and you can't do that with or without a vaccine. That's not my decision. That's for each individual to make.
So how would these passports work and what are the issues at stake? To get some clarity, I spoke to Professor Melinda Mills. She's the director of the Leverhulme Centre for Demographic Science in the UK. She's authored a 12-step plan for the use of vaccine passports, which has been submitted to the British government to help with their planning. Does she think passports are the key to getting things back to normal?
Well, that is the promise that, you know, something like this, we're all looking at ways to get back to normal. But I'm afraid to tell you that it's not a silver bullet. But what we try to do is say, okay, well, if we do want to do this, we set out 12 criteria and look at, you know, which ones have been met and which haven't.
So talk me through
the major city on the planet. You know, obviously they've been struggling, but hopefully they'll come back again when things get better. The one challenge, though, with companies like Uber and Lyft is that you had to have a smartphone with a data connection and the app to use the service. But now,
you don't need that
Lyft,
stupid light in the window.
actually is allowing you to call a cab, from what I understand.
This is something that I think they're basically beta testing in Florida right now. They've got a select list of cities that they support, and you can actually call a number. And, you know, so this would be great. What if you lose your phone? How are you going to get a lift home?
Yeah.
Being able to just have someone call a cab for you, you know, this sounds old school, but it makes sense in this kind of world where you can do that. So far, it's just apparently Uber experimented with a similar feature back in 2020 in Arizona. You know, one of the things that one of the articles I read, you know, basically what's old is new again, because, you know, probably it just worked before fine.
Yeah.
And you don't always have to do.
Ancien militant qui navigue entre ses souvenirs de 1958 et son présent en 1968, on devient l'observateur un peu discret et distant de la vie sous dictature et bulle de liberté qui éclate avec fracas, comme souvent sous les dictatures. Et au-delà de ça, c'est un très beau portrait de la ville de Lisbonne. C'est très lumineux, on voyage, c'est vraiment super.
Ça s'appelle donc Sur un air de Fado, Nicolas Barral chez Dargaud, une bande dessinée israélienne, Routou Modan, on le connaît pour son humour iconoclaste. Là, il signe Tunnel et c'est chez Actes Sud.
Là aussi, on voyage. Alors cette fois-ci entre l'Israël et la Palestine, c'est l'histoire de la fille d'un archéologue qui décide de partir à la recherche de l'Arche d'Alliance, recherche interrompue par son père. Et c'est presque Indiana Jones, quoi. Il y a un peu de l'aventure, il y a de la trahison, des histoires de famille et
De Nintendo, mais le nouveau Premier ministre Mario Draghi. Après une énième crise politique dans le pays, l'ancien président de la Banque centrale européenne a pris les rênes du gouvernement. Pour autant, ce spécialiste des rouages de l'économie est-il taillé pour ce poste très politique? Vincent Souriau signe le portrait de Mario Draghi.
Son costume de Super Mario, on l'a découvert le 26 juillet 2012. Ce jour-là, en pleine crise financière, alors que l'Europe menace d'éclater devant le poids de la dette grecque et que les investisseurs s'affolent, Mario Draghi va sauver l'euro grâce à une petite phrase.
The ECB is ready to do whatever it takes.
La Banque centrale européenne est prête à faire tout ce qu'il faudra pour préserver l'euro. Et croyez-moi, cela sera suffisant.
It will be enough.
En quelques mots, il calme les marchés et fait de la BCE un bouclier capable d'acheter la dette des pays en difficulté. La légende du super banquier vient de naître et elle prend racine dans l'humilité de Mario Draghi, d'après l'économiste Benoît Cœuré, qui à l'époque travaillait avec lui au sein du directoire de la BCE.
On a vécu par exemple des nuits de négociations à Bruxelles sur la crise grecque. On a eu des discussions longues et compliquées avec Alexis Tsipras, avec Yanis Varoufakis, où il y avait des désaccords profonds.
Plan the recovery from COVID. We have our opportunity to change course. As part of our recovery plan in Israel, we are focusing on clean energy, clean tech, and restoring natural spaces. These efforts will be good not only for nature, but for our economy.
News and media companies. And coming up, we're going to be talking about Clubhouse once again. This is a new social app that is all audio and
splitting us up into normal and unsafe on the basis of who's vaccinated and who's not, I think just isn't the way to do that. Our aim with vaccination, our strategy should be, as we're doing, to roll out the vaccine quickly, get to the point where enough of the population is vaccinated to stop COVID from spreading. And based on the current figures, we're doing really well towards that. But what I wanted to say is, this brings me to another issue with vaccine passports, on a UK level at least, is that I think they're just going to be a waste of resources because their utility ought to be limited. Once we get to the point
of the past, so that we can build a better future for our region, for the planet, and for all of our children. And I would like, once again, to thank you very much for taking part in this convention. And I would like to bless you with the traditional blessing of the Jews at the beginning of
or a similar scheme like we've seen in Saudi Arabia and Israel, that it would force people who are perhaps vaccine hesitant to come forwards and get a jab. Now, I think I know what you're going to say about this idea, but how would you respond to that?
I think this idea of vaccine passports as a form of, let's be honest, coercion is a really dangerous idea. So, whether we see it as a carrot or a stick, whether it's get vaccinated and you can go to the pub, or if you don't get vaccinated, your kids can't go to school. I think this simplistic approach just fails to engage with much more complex and nuanced factors that are at play. Let me explain that a little further. For people and groups who may have doubts about the vaccination for whatever reason, I think using passports as a form effectively of coercion is liable to amplify mistrust and to increase rather than diminish resistance. The question of vaccinations already highly politicized, and we've seen with other interventions such as mask wearing how public health behaviors can rapidly become aligned with ideological differences, and how those differences are then amplified and polarized further by the nature of discussion, especially on social media. So again, vaccine passports, by splitting the population into the do's and the don'ts, or the wills and the won'ts, if you like, I think is going to lead to even greater polarization and create deeper social divisions. And at a time when collective action and solidarity are more important than ever, that's the very last thing that we need.
Dr. Sarah Chan. When the pandemic is finally declared to be over, many have argued that global attention must fully turn to the environment. There have been calls to build back green in order to prevent the impending climate catastrophe. Here's Sir David Attenborough warning the UN this week that the world risks the collapse of everything if climate change isn't tackled.
Perhaps the most significant lesson brought by these last 12 months has been that we are no longer separate nations, each best served by looking after its own needs and security. We are a
Répondeur en fonction. Bonjour, nous ne pourrons pas prendre votre appel en ce moment. Au son du timbre, veuillez laisser votre message.
Tried to find something better. As soon as the indigenous girl started talking, they cut the audio.
Got that beam from the Japanese. My French girl waves, you can remind me of mac and cheese. It is what it has to be. I'm killing off who's after me. They have to see me rich and that's swear.
What do you call it? Like
who be frontin' for? They flying like it's a trampoline. These bitches couldn't marry a guy. It was a Magdalene. I shot like a little bro. What's happening? It's these instrumentals we got with bragging on. It's rose with beer, real class riches. We drag 'em on. The nigga with the gate and seven, but they were dragging on. The Megatron, landing in Lebanon. He was slapping that back and forth on the tender ball. Used to live on French Street, right in the Esplanade. Bitches run the strip with me, filming your espionage. You know that's why they set for it. Why you niggas say potential neck for it? Jumping in shifts to be win. Like connect for the cylinder, always spin. I connect for it, right into the dome when I get it at the chest to Detroit rapper. When you go on tour, it's all music. Maybe when we go on tour, it's all shootings. Like other chefs got kicked, I gotta shoot it. Nigga, if you talk that talk, you gotta do it. Why they try me? I wear my heart on my iron sleeve. I'm the last of a down break. Why they try me? I wear my heart on my iron sleeve. I'm the last of a down break. Like he just wanna go on tour and make music. But every time you go on tours, it's all shootings. The last of a dying breed. I'm the last of a dying breed. I uppercut these fucks in their chin and they fly with ease. I bleed what I have to bleed. This blood's what I have to see. So thick, don't sit with your fam. I call it Applebee's. Who the fuck trying to get stuck? Tell them ask for me. That match pack about to get struck. I brought the gasoline. I've never lost. I got OGs to get it back for me. Calm me down, calm with the crowd. Call me your majesty, God. They try to handle me, Lord. No, I'll play that. The bullets in that gray Mac A-track. They go way back. About them up, top your mom. Look where the safe at. Put numbers on your head. You already covered in face tats, boy. Why they always trying to snake that, boy? Charlie got the defibrillator to shake that, boy. Forget about it. You turn me to Rocky ASAP, boy. I'm the last of a dying breed. They wanna break that, boy. Like, you bringing all that beef to the farm. My man's branded you. If you don't get respect in the streets, I can't stand with you. They tell you you a threat on the beat. Your man's scamming you. The bench is like a beast when it spins. Crash Bandicoot. Pull up with a camera crew. Cannons in your face now. Anybody that's lying to us is lying face down. White boy, nice with a pen. This ain't no 8 Mile. We playing hopscotch in the spots where the body's traced out. Cause when you go on tour, it's all music. And baby, when we go on tour, it's just shootings. Drive-bys, your eyes wide shut, we gone Kubrick. See, we ain't really battle that talk, we just do shit. I wear my heart on my iron sleeve. I'm the last of a down breed. Why they try me? I wear my heart on my iron sleeve. I'm the last of a down breed. Like he just wanna go on tour and make music. I'm the last of a down breed. But every time you go on tours, it's all shootings. I'm the last of a down breed.
This would be a good time for the system to jam up for no reason. Yep. President, letting the world know you're there. Wave that pedophile, white supremacist flag high. We all want to see you.
Headed to the ring, see my nigga walking like D-Lo. 3-5-4 like a giant bigger than Big Show. All I really know is how to stunt. Now who the tree truck the end of the month? Now I'm passion. 3 times more the end of the blunt. They say they MCs. Most of them just rhyme off one syllable. Listen to the beats and you wonder how were they killable. I'm so down to earth, we were living the minerals. When there's a maximum sentence, niggas ain't getting minimum. Criminal records getting numbers, we couldn't visit them. Trying to have faith, but more was looking like Little Kim. In that mind situation, they can play in no middleman. Take it to the source, like Pacino and Eminem. Drinking no niggas but paying them, so they defending them. I hate these dick riders, us are Swiss-siders. Try to keep this fire contained like pit gliders. My nigga in and out of Miami, that's Swiss Priors. What the fuck's why I've been rapping for Rough Riders? I need my credit now, 50 bands for the fire. I watched my lawyer in court, said you're hired. I heard the Gully Demon tape, I was inspired. What up, love? She won the illness like Giallo. Through the city where the dark clouds follow. Jets to Vegas, my girl stretching naked. This world crazy to survive, you need mental patience. So I'm never making cause where the changes. Control climates where the cold flow demonstrated. Ride no waves, choose to stay true. Salute the DJ when my music's played. Shallow graves, we cruise delayed. Watch dudes get paid. Smoke a blunt when my suit gets made. Top dollar when you pay the best. I've been sinning more, praying less. Blindfolded while I'm playing chess, placing bets. Prepare when I take the test. I'm the reason you can lay the rest. Yo, I cook so much that I can feed the masses. Write the gospel, speak the passage, see the madness. Sam Rothstein flicking, I can see no ashes. I close the squad like see no gas. My face soured up like milk when the ghost died. Could've made a name but got a toe tag. They couldn't cipher with me, they need a notepad. I put the hit in the house, I'm like a cold dad. I put the hit in your mouth, you just a program. I ain't got respect for y'all here. I put the work and let the job there. I put the work in my mind clears. Get hot oil and gorilla tape to an armchair. Nothing. All the facts rapping, you ain't saying nothing. They want a nice slow, cause I love shit bumping. I'd probably make a drug and I'm up to something. Yeah. You know there ain't no pork in my make muffin. Pop, that goes 2 shots. These youngers wildin' out. I'm Cool J in recess. Mama told me to knock 'em out. These youngers got no respect. 2 L's that's walking around and show and tell until they end up in a lost and found. You king of the city, then how you lost your crown? I'm king of the dot. That's organic about my gully sound. Yeah. You niggas just not familiar. Got white boys and bury out to a really hit you with a pump and blooding up your interior. They couldn't even find him. Helicopter searched the area. It's gonna demon papa. I'm the shotter. Tattoo my name on the tatas. Wrap it up in plastic, make it proper. Niggas try to wild you and con you like Shaka. Knife to the dumpling. and I'm like Shabba, shopping at the rapper. Got an Esplanade with my homie and my partner. My nigga. They got my back, I got their back too. Their back too. If they clap, I gotta clap too. Now they don't understand. Now the 3 mans, I'ma clap too. These bodies like bills, nigga, they pass through. Yeah, the first place, at least I passed you. Yeah, no face, no case, that's when it slaps through. Exit wounds got him coughing like a bad flu. He had moves, now we looking like a statue. I made this fuckboy.
Of a killer, the mind of a maniac, the mind of a lunatic, the mind of a native who ain't giving up, a native who don't give a fuck, a native with the screws, but they the fucking screw. I got the mind of a killer, the mind of a maniac, the mind of a lunatic, the mind of a native who ain't giving up, a native who don't give a fuck, a native with the screws, but they the fucking screw. I have a few screws and most people don't. I'm a crazy little bastard, full-blown criminal, savage through and through. For my warrior, I have known the game that I was shown. I keep to my own. I got a ill temper in a very short fuse. The patience that I got, you don't want me to lose. I'm known to blow up. I'm known for destruction. I'm known for the wicked. The wickedness of us from the blood in my veins. And the ways I'll never change. I'm slowly going insane. She keeps fucking with my brain. I'm lost in the sauce. Can't find my way out. I'm from a small town and we don't fuck around. You can hate all you want. Shit ain't gonna stop me. I'm stomp up and down the block and keep on romping. I'm romping and rolling and romping. This hype boy hustle shit ain't nobody stopping. The mind of a killer, the mind of a maniac, the mind of a lunatic, the mind of a native who ain't giving up, a native who don't give a fuck, a native with the screws, but they the fucking screw. I got the mind of a killer, the mind of a maniac, the mind of a lunatic, the mind of a native who ain't giving up, a native who don't give a fuck, a native with the screws, but they the fucking screw.
Disrespectful whenever I lift the pencil. I'm hoping the shit offends you. I'm fisting lesbian bitches while spitting on instrumentals. You get the picture, I'm the sickest indigenous spitter ever living. Never been a percentage of pussy in me. My family is legendary. Residential school survivors, persistence is necessary. Tried to kill us, you couldn't do it. We're invincible, it's hereditary. And by the looks of you, you wouldn't do any. I'm not a fan of you if you be looking too friendly. Smack the food from out the back, you tried to disrespect me. I will tell you that your rent is past due by your few centuries. Fucking statues, fucking new Bentley. We've been hungry on the rest, trying to make our 4 cents, but we short 2 pennies. Yeah, my mood is edgy, I'm hungry. Somebody told me that my food was ready. Yo, who the fuck do I gotta prove to that I shoot too deadly? Since a papoose, I've been cuckoo. Who you wanna push? I move too steady. It's that boom bap flow. Call me Blues Cap Kenny. It's that Tupac and Sitting Bull in a room full of bitches in the nude sipping Henny. I've been in the woods with my do-rag sweating. I got my moose cat ready. I'm out here hunting in this bitch. I do that heavy, and if you ain't from the res, there ain't nothing you can tell me. I got a screw loose, but you knew that already. Got to get that dough like I used to at daycare. Fuck trying to play fair. I can just construct another way to make my paper. I'm getting great at my craft. I've been amazing at rap since 97 and 87. I got arrived. I told my homie that we would make it before we die. And then I lost him to suicide. It was a shock to my body, but I'm alright. I made him a promise that we would be the greatest that ever did it. So tonight, all you motherfuckers are gotta die. I'm hoping these above watching the bodies that I've been piling up. This is survival of the fittest. I'm conditioned for anything. Native overqualified. Try and play me, I'm like Muhammad Ali in his prime. You sleep on me or dream of beating me, you better fucking wake up and apologize. Wanna whip me, you can holler on or off the mic. I'm a product of the Wabanaki tribe. I cannot be copied, I am one of one. I don't think you want a problem with me, son. Get the skinning and the scalp and then I'm done. No emotion on my face, not even one. I'm the chief of these lands here. Tell Annie Green Gable she needs a pap smear. Kill the damn deer with my fucking bare hands last year. This is res life living, get some liquor and get stabbed here.
I should do the Dialist story. I forgot Dialist story. There's hope yet. Now what?
Welcome to Environment Canada's Weather Service. La ville de Toronto. Les observations horaires, 7 minutes 2. Les conditions météorologiques à 22h. Toronto, aéroport international Pearson, dégagé, la température plus 1, l'humidité relative 86%, le vent du sud-est à 3 km à l'heure, la pression barométrique 102,4 kPa et à la hausse. Toronto, en ville, la température plus 3, l'humidité relative 83%, la pression barométrique 102,4 kPa et à la hausse. L'aéroport de Toronto Centre-Ville, brume, la température plus 2, l'humidité relative 94%, le vent du sud-sud-ouest à 17 km à l'heure, la pression barométrique 102,4 kPa. Pour la prévision publique pour les 7 prochains jours, prévision émise par Environnement Canada à 15h30 le samedi 27 février pour ce soir, cette nuit, dimanche et la nuit suivante. Ville de Toronto pour ce soir et cette nuit, dégagé. Ennuagement tard ce soir. Nappe de brouillard se formant vers minuit. Vent d'ouest de 20 km à l'heure avec rafale à 40, devenant faible tôt ce soir. Minimum, -2, refroidissement éolien, -4 au cours de la nuit. Pour dimanche, nuageux, 60% de probabilité d'averse tard le matin et en après-midi. Risque d'un orage tard en après-midi. Nappe de brouillard se dissipant le matin. Vent devenant d'est à 20 km à l'heure avec rafale à 40 le matin, puis devenant du sud à 20 en après-midi. Maximum 7, l'indice ultraviolet de 2 ou bas. Refroidissement éolien -5 le matin. Dimanche soir, nuageux, 60% de probabilité d'averse en soirée. Risque d'un orage tôt en soirée. Vent du sud de 20 km à l'heure devenant d'ouest à 40 avec rafale à 60 vers minuit. Minimum 0. Prévision à long terme pour lundi, averse de neige.
Wait, 1 days.
Maximum -1 lundi soir. Passage nuageux avec 40% de probabilité d'averse de neige. Venteux. Minimum -11. Pour mardi, ensoleillé. Maximum +1 mardi soir. Passage nuageux. Minimum -3. Pour mercredi, alternance de soleil et de nuages. Maximum
Overdose. You already know what it is. Overdose. Go to King and overdose. Overdose. That's us. Raise a shot to another fucking year. Light that blunt if you highlight air. Start that line if you don't fucking care. I do drugs, I do drugs, I do drugs.
I do everything I want. I do everything I want. I can do anything I want. I can do anything I want.
I do drugs, I do drugs, I do drugs. I do drugs, I do drugs, I do drugs. Winner, chicken dinner, I'm gonna eat you up. I'm in the club, I'm gonna have a party, I'm gonna live it up. Take another pill for another shot. Here's another dab, I can never get enough. Need enough so we can last. Yeah, I'm a dirty ass, grimy line starter. That's how I keep my motivation. I'll do fine with just the chord. That way can be on top of my zone. I don't need to scatter my thoughts when I'm relighting lyrical miracles. Everything else to me don't matter. Watch your back. I'm a vicious ass rapper.
True, I am.
Fuck the jelly before the
It's Don't Get Close. It's Raw Dog. You know it. Yeah, we ain't getting none. Capping his head, trapping his back. 40s and 5s, beam on the Mac. Hop out the whip, using the mask. 40 with 30s, you do the math. Hey, nigga said he wanna kill me, nigga. I'm right here, nigga. Hey, real deal, you a Toy Story buzz light here, nigga. Trapping his head, trapping his back. 40s and 5s, beam on the Mac. Hop out the whip, using the mask. 40s with 30s, you do the math. Hey, nigga said he wanna kill me, nigga. I'm right here, nigga. Hey, real deal, you a Toy Story buzz light here, nigga. Niggas on my dick, so I hit him with the first. Clientele link, gotta hit him with the work. Ops just block shit, gets on my nerves. Left the band though, I'll be back on the first. Don't get close, no, I won't get hurt. Run up with a frown, walk off with a smirk. I ain't put it down, send him to the nurse. Shorty got bands, tell me what is yours worth. Mine for the block, came straight from the dirt. Take her up the ends, move to the bird. Got coke, got crack, got perks. Got beef, rap bullets that hurt. Hands over bread like sesame seeds. Big bird on the block, Sesame Street. Whip, 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 turn a trip to a treat. I don't got friends, man, I only got feet. Cap in his head, trap in his back. 40s and 5s, beam on the Mac. Hop out the whip, using the mask. 40 with 30s, you do the math. Hey, nigga said he wanna kill me, nigga. I'm right here, nigga. Hey, real deal, you a Toy Story buzz light here, nigga. Trap in his head, trap in his back. 40s and 5s, beam on the Mac. Hop out the whip, using the mask. 40s with 30s, you do the math. Hey, nigga said he wanna kill me, nigga. I'm right here, nigga. Hey, real deal, you a Toy Story buzz light here, nigga.
Got it for the low, got it for the low. What you really know, I got all the snow. Come right off the boat, come right off the boat. Come right off the boat, come right off the boat. This year you already know. I feel like I've been the GOAT. I know I can hold my own. I know I can hold my own. All I know that crime pay. I'ma get it one day. I'm cruising down the highway. All I know that crime pay. Get 'em money 5 ways. I'm cruising down the highway. I'ma get it one day.
Yeah, they talking, but they never lived it. I've been gunning for them 7 digits. Came back with a better vision. I ain't never switching. I'ma get this chicken. Crime pays, that's my way. Try to tell them, but they never listen. Fuck the ops, fuck the cops. I'ma make a meal this winter. Merry Christmas. I've been on it since Dipset. How they wanna get their lips wet. All these bitches used to try to swear me. Now I'm flexing on them with this pimp set.
All I know that crime pay. I'ma get it one day. I'm cruising down the highway. All I know that crime pay. Get 'em money 5 ways.
with florists, cake makers, photographers and caterers all making money from those two little words, I do. But of course, the industry has been thrown into disarray as the global pandemic meant that big social gatherings were largely forbidden. So how did couples make it down the aisle in 2020? And what will the rest of 2021 hold for the industry? Ed Butler reports.
I'm Lauren Delgado.
And I'm Patrick Delgado.
And we got married on November 20th, 2020.
Isn't that the song that sells chocolates imported from Italy or something?
We are currently implementing a national program on reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, a mechanism developed by parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. This program is aimed at discouraging deforestation, conserving already existing forests, enhancing carbon stock, and mitigating climate change impact. We have also facilitated the designation of Enema Nature Park in Beni Island, River State, as the 12th Ramsar site of international importance. The government is equally incorporating biodiversity into tourism sector through a national program targeted at combating illegal wildlife trade and trafficking in two pilot protected area sites, namely Gashaka Gunti National Park and the Yankari Games Reserve. In fulfillment of our international obligations, Nigeria is expediting the process of accession to both the Nagoya Protocol on access to genetic resources and the fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from their utilization, as well as the Nagoya Kuala Lumpur Supplementary Protocol on liability and redress to the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety. Concerning ocean governance and marine biodiversity protection, Nigeria is among the first 12 countries to sign on to the 30 by 30 Global Ocean Alliance. Accordingly, we have identified 2 viable sites for the establishment of marine protected areas to help in the protection, conservation, and management of marine and coastal strategic action plan of the Lake Chad Basin. Nigeria is spearheading sub-regional security, provide jobs, boost agricultural output, food security, and reduce poverty. Towards the delivery diversity aspiration, Nigeria has concentrated on the provision of the Convention on Biological Diversity, the protocols adopted under the Convention, and other relevant multilateral environmental agreements, international environmental policies, and programs. Let me reiterate the call for dedicated international engagement in support of sub-regional efforts to raise the $50 billion United States dollars required to actualize the recharging of the Lake Chad. Let me seize the opportunity to express Nigeria's government and implementation of a post-2020 global biodiversity framework building on the Aichi biodiversity targets and regional biodiversity